Did you know that the legacy of an ancient civilization can be so profound that it continues to shape our laws, our architecture, and even the calendar we use every day? Welcome to ClassBites. Today, we journey back in time to explore the epic story of ancient Rome. From its mythical origins to the fall of its mighty empire, examining the society, soldiers, and structures that defined one of history's greatest powers. In the grand tapestry of origin stories, few are as iconic as that of ancient Rome, a tale woven around twin brothers destined for greatness. This foundational legend begins with Romulus and Remus, said to be the sons of a Vestal virgin named Rhea Silvia and the god Mars. Their story, however, does not start in a palace, but in peril. Abandoned as infants, they were cast out, only to be saved by an act of improbable compassion. A she-wolf discovered the twins and famously suckled them, an image that would become an enduring symbol of the city they would one day create. Their survival was further secured by a shepherd, Faustulus, who found them and raised them as his own. As the brothers grew into young men, they exhibited remarkable strength and bravery, their noble lineage shining through their humble upbringing. In time, they uncovered the truth of their royal heritage and embarked on a quest to reclaim their birthright, successfully overthrowing the tyrant Amulius and restoring their grandfather to his rightful place on the throne. With their family's honor restored, they set out to found a town of their own on the very ground where they had been rescued. Yet it was here, at the moment of creation, that their bond would be irrevocably broken. A disgraceful quarrel arose because, as twins, no question of seniority could settle who should lead. They decided to let the gods decide through augury, a practice of observing omens. Romulus took his station on the Palatine Hill, while Remus stood upon the Aventine. The conflict escalated when Romulus began to construct a city wall. In a moment of defiance, Remus jumped over the nascent barrier, an act for which he was struck down by his brother. With his rival gone, Romulus consolidated his power, and the new settlement was named Rome in his honor. This powerful narrative, however, is one that historians approach with caution, as it is more fitted to adorn the creations of a poet than the authentic records of a historian. When we turn from myth to the soil itself, archaeology tells a different story of Rome's beginnings. The evidence indicates that the city did not spring into existence from a single act of foundation, but developed from the gradual union of several hilltop villages. The Palatine Hill, central to the founding myth, is indeed believed to be the site of the city's earliest core, with findings suggesting the area was inhabited as early as the 10th century before the Common Era. Excavations have brought to light a small hut village, with remains indicating the presence of structures with walls of beaten earth, supported by a framework of wooden poles and covered with a roof of interwoven branches. According to tradition, the period known as the Roman Kingdom began with the city's founding and ended with the overthrow of the kings and the establishment of the Republic, roughly 2.5 centuries later. Little is certain about this history, as no contemporary records have survived, but both literary and archaeological sources are clear that kings did once rule in Rome. Following the expulsion of the last king, a new form of government was born, one designed to prevent the concentration of power in any single individual. This new republic was a sophisticated government built on a delicate balance of authority and a profound respect for the written word. It was a careful blend of three distinct elements, creating a system of checks and balances that inspired political thinkers for centuries. The executive authority rested with the magistrates, elected officials who served for limited terms, typically 1 year. At their apex were two consuls, who acted as heads of state and commanders of the army. Below them, praetors administered the courts, aediles managed the city's daily affairs, and quaestors oversaw the state treasury. A unique and powerful position was that of the tribune of the plebs, 10 officials elected by the common people who held the extraordinary power of the veto, allowing them to halt any action by another magistrate or the Senate. The aristocratic counterweight to these elected officials was the Senate. This venerable body, whose members were all former magistrates serving for life, was the repository of experience and tradition. While technically an advisory council, the Senate's influence, or auctoritas, was immense. It controlled state finances, directed foreign policy, and administered the vast territories under Roman control. The democratic element was expressed through the popular assemblies, where the Roman people exercised their sovereign power. The centuriate assembly elected the highest magistrates and held the power to declare war, while the tribal assembly elected lower magistrates. Finally, the plebeian council gave a voice to the commoners, electing their tribunes and passing resolutions that became binding on the entire populace. This intricate political machine was operated by its citizens, but the concept of Roman citizenship, or civitas, was itself a complex and evolving idea. To declare civis Romanus sum, or I am a Roman citizen, was to claim a powerful set of rights and protections, including the right to vote, hold office, and receive a fair trial. Citizenship could be acquired by birth, granted for loyalty, or earned by non-citizen soldiers after 25 years of honorable service. The foundation upon which this entire structure rested was Roman law, a system of jurisprudence rooted in the people's demand for transparency. Early in the Republic, the plebeians, weary of the arbitrary rulings of patrician magistrates, agitated for a written code. The result was the 12 Tables, a set of laws inscribed on bronze tablets and displayed publicly in the Forum, ensuring that the law was known to all and applied equally. This legal and political framework was protected and expanded by the Roman military, an engine of conquest and assimilation that fundamentally reshaped the ancient world. At the heart of this system was the individual legionary, a heavy infantryman burdened with equipment that could exceed 100 pounds. His protection evolved from the flexible mail shirt to the later lorica segmentata, a complex armor of overlapping iron plates. He carried the iconic scutum, a large curved rectangular shield that could be locked together with others to form the formidable testudo, or tortoise formation. For offense, he carried the pilum, a heavy javelin designed to bend upon impact, and the gladius, a short sword designed for the brutal, close-quarters reality of formation fighting. These men were organized into the primary tactical unit of the Roman army, the legion. At full strength, a legion comprised nearly 5,500 soldiers, divided into 10 cohorts, with each cohort subdivided into centuries. On the battlefield, the legion deployed with devastating effectiveness, typically in a 3-line formation known as the triplex aces, a checkerboard pattern that provided immense tactical flexibility. The army's prowess extended far beyond the open field. Its engineering capabilities were legendary, capable of constructing a fully fortified camp in a matter of hours, or building monumental siege works, such as the double walls at Alesia. This army evolved from a citizen militia into a professional, standing army, following a series of reforms near the end of the 2nd century before the Common Era. Property requirements for service were abolished, allowing the landless to enlist. This transformation had profound consequences. It created a far more effective military machine, but this very instrument of Rome's expansion would become the primary catalyst for the Republic's fall. The allegiance of the legions shifted from the abstract authority of the Senate to the charismatic commanders who led them to victory and promised them rewards. The army was no longer a state institution, but a political tool, enabling ambitious generals to wage war against one another for control of the Republic itself. An early attempt to reverse this trend came when the dictator Sulla, after seizing power with his own loyal army, tried to restore the Senate's supremacy. But his reforms were built on a fatal contradiction. He used an autocratic military force to legislate a return to traditional government, setting a dangerous precedent. This new reality of personalized power found its expression in the formation of triumvirates. The first was an informal, secret pact between 3 of the state's most powerful men, Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, who pooled their influence to dominate politics. A generation later, the second triumvirate of Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus was a formal, legally constituted body with sweeping authority, institutionalizing the very concentration of power the Republic was designed to prevent. In this age of profound political instability, one figure emerged who would not merely bend the rules, but break them entirely. Gaius Julius Caesar rose to take the new precedent of military-backed power and forge from it an entirely new reality. His success on the battlefield was not born of revolutionary weaponry, but of an unparalleled command of strategy, engineering, and discipline. The core tenet of his military doctrine was celeritas, or speed. He moved his legions with a relentless pace, often striking opponents when they were least prepared. In a breathtaking display of Roman power, his men constructed a wooden pile bridge across the Rhine River in just 10 days, a psychological weapon demonstrating that no natural border could contain Rome's reach. Nowhere was his strategic mind more evident than at the siege of Alesia. Trapping a Gallic army within their fortress, he built an inner wall of fortifications, and then, as a massive relief army approached, he built a second outer wall, defending his own besieging army from attack. It was a masterpiece of siege warfare that secured the conquest of Gaul. While his legions were securing new frontiers, Caesar was waging a different kind of war in Rome. He understood that military might was useless without political power, and frequently bypassed the obstructive Senate, taking legislation directly to the popular assemblies. He consolidated his authority through the office of dictator, eventually having himself named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. This final step shattered Republican tradition. He used his power to enact sweeping reforms, expanding the Senate with his own supporters, reorganizing the grain dole, settling his veterans in new colonies, and, in his most enduring legacy, reforming the calendar. When the Senate, aligned with his rival Pompey, ordered him to disband his army, he crossed the Rubicon River with his legions, committing an irrevocable act of insurrection and plunging the Republic into civil war. His ultimate triumph, however, bred the conspiracy that would end his story. A group of senators, seeing his permanent dictatorship as a mortal threat, confronted him at a meeting of the Senate. In the intense encounter that followed, he received 23 wounds. The conspirators' hope of restoring the old republic perished with him. Instead, his absence created a power vacuum that led to another 14 years of civil war. His heir, Octavian, learned a crucial lesson from this. After defeating his last rivals, he masterfully engineered a system that preserved the facade of the Republic while concentrating ultimate power in his hands. In 2 constitutional settlements, he was granted the honorific title of Augustus, control over the key military provinces, tribunician power for life, and a greater proconsular imperium, giving him command authority over all of Rome's armies. The Senate still met, and elections were still held, but the substance of power resided with one man. The end of a century of internal strife ushered in a period of unprecedented peace and stability, known as the Pax Romana. Augustus secured the empire's borders, reorganized provincial administration, and sponsored a golden age of literature and architecture. A new ideology took root, centered on the imperial cult, which linked the emperor's authority to the divine. The Republic, born from the overthrow of a king, had died not in a single decisive blow, but through a gradual erosion, replaced by a stable autocratic system that would endure for centuries. In this new imperial world, life was a performance on a meticulously designed stage, where every individual's role was defined by a rigid social hierarchy. At the apex stood the patricians, the aristocratic elite, followed by the equestrians, a formidable business class. The vast majority of the population consisted of the plebeians, the farmers, artisans, and laborers. Beneath them were the freedmen, and at the very bottom were the enslaved, who were considered property with no legal personhood. The bedrock of this society was the family, presided over by the paterfamilias, the male head of the household, whose authority was absolute. The chasm between the classes was nowhere more apparent than in their homes. The wealthy resided in a domus, a private house centered around an atrium and adorned with intricate mosaics and vibrant frescoes. The urban majority was packed into multi-story apartment blocks called insulae, which were often cheaply constructed and notoriously susceptible to fire and collapse. Diet, too, was a clear marker of status. The foundation for all was grain, olives, and grapes, but while the poor ate coarse bread and porridge, the elite enjoyed multi-course feasts featuring exotic dishes. Even the clothes a Roman wore were a public declaration of their place, from the broad purple stripe on a senator's tunic to the heavy woolen toga that signified a male citizen's identity. This stark division between rich and poor was fueled by a colossal economic engine, one of the most integrated pre-industrial economies in history. Its lifeblood was a sophisticated system of currency, credit, and commerce, sustained by the stability of the Roman peace. At its heart was a standardized trimetallic currency, the gold aureus, the silver denarius, and the brass sesterces. This system, however, contained a seed of its own undoing, as emperors began a practice of currency debasement, progressively reducing the precious metal content of their coins, which eventually led to rampant inflation. Beyond physical coins, the economy ran on credit managed by bankers. This money animated bustling markets, the most important of which was the Macellum for perishable goods. For the capital itself, no commercial activity was more critical than the annona, the state-managed grain supply, a monumental logistical operation that fed Rome's massive population. The labor that powered this entire enterprise was fundamentally dependent on an enslaved workforce, constituting an estimated 10 to 20% of the empire's population. Goods, grain, and people moved along an infrastructure network of unparalleled quality, with famous paved roads stitching the provinces together, and maritime routes crisscrossing the Mediterranean, a sea the Romans confidently called Mare Nostrum, or Our Sea. This Roman world was built upon an unparalleled engineering, a practical genius that transformed landscapes. The empire's lifeblood flowed through its roads and its aqueducts. Roads like the Appian Way were sophisticated pieces of infrastructure, designed for permanence with a multi-layered construction that ensured durability. At its zenith, this network spanned over 400,000 kilometers. Just as roads carried legions, aqueducts carried the essential resource of water, enabling cities to swell to unprecedented sizes. Rome itself was eventually supplied by 11 major aqueducts, delivering over 1 million cubic meters of water daily. The engineering behind these conduits was a marvel of precision, using a gentle, continuous gradient over vast distances, with most of their length consisting of subterranean channels lined with waterproof mortar. In the heart of the city, this engineering prowess was displayed for spectacle. The Flavian amphitheater, known as the Colosseum, was the largest amphitheater ever built, a freestanding elliptical structure supported by a brilliant system of arches and vaults. Beneath its arena floor lay the hypogeum, a complex subterranean world of tunnels and chambers with elevators and hoists to deliver combatants and scenery to the surface. If the Colosseum was a monument to public spectacle, the Pantheon was a temple to architectural perfection. A visitor first passes through a classical portico before entering a vast circular interior crowned by a magnificent coffered dome, which for centuries remained the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Its genius lies in its construction, using Roman concrete with varied aggregate to reduce weight as it rose, and at its apex is the oculus, a 27-foot-wide opening to the sky. The human mind, in its quest for understanding, does not possess a separate chamber for faith. Rather, the architecture of belief is woven into the very fabric of our social and cognitive systems. The stories that form the bedrock of many traditions, myths, are not mere fables, but sacred narratives that establish order and meaning. This connection to the divine is made tangible through ritual, a practice that allows participants to re-experience the sacred, foundational events of their tradition. Within this evolving spiritual context of the Roman world, a new movement emerged from Second Temple Judaism. Its first adherents were Jewish, and their central claim was that Jesus was the Christ. Following his crucifixion, his apostles are said to have dispersed, spreading his teachings. The movement grew with remarkable consistency, from fewer than 10,000 people at the end of the 1st century to over 6 million, or 10% of the empire's population 2 centuries later. This expansion was facilitated by the security of Roman roads and a pivotal decision to welcome non-Jews. This growth occurred despite periods of intense persecution until an imperial proclamation granted tolerance to the faith. Eventually, Nicene Christianity was declared the official state religion of the Roman Empire, a profound transformation of the spiritual landscape. The story of this great empire's end is never one of a single fatal blow, but rather a slow, grinding dissolution. The Western Roman Empire did not fall in a day. It was a process spanning generations. At the heart of its troubles was a profound transformation of its military, which grew increasingly reliant on non-Roman recruits, creating a new class of powerful military leaders whose loyalty was often to themselves, not the state. This vast military required a river of gold to sustain it, and the empire's economy was buckling under the strain. The state resorted to systematically debasing its currency, unleashing rampant inflation that shattered public confidence. A crushing tax burden drove many citizens to abandon their farms, and the intricate trade networks that had been the empire's lifeblood began to fray. This economic disintegration was both a cause and a consequence of profound political instability. The empire was plagued by endless civil wars, and the decision to divide it into permanent eastern and western halves left the West, the poorer and more vulnerable of the two, exposed. Beneath these crises lay deeper social and demographic shifts, as plagues and warfare caused the population to shrink significantly. The final unraveling occurred over a century of intense shocks: a catastrophic military defeat at Adrianople, the crossing of the frozen Rhine by a massive force of invaders, and the repeated sacking of the city of Rome itself signaled the end. The loss of the wealthy provinces of North Africa deprived the state of a crucial source of grain and revenue. The end, when it came late in the 5th century, was almost an anticlimax. The last Western Roman emperor, a young boy, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain who chose not to appoint a successor. The collapse of central authority led to political fragmentation of the West, yet the legacy of Rome endured. In the power vacuum, the Christian Church emerged as a powerful unifying institution, preserving elements of Roman administration and the Latin language. Roman legal principles were eventually rediscovered, and the powerful idea of a universal empire never truly perished, inspiring future rulers for centuries to come. If you found this journey through the rise and fall of ancient Rome compelling, please like this video, subscribe to ClassBites for more deep dives into history, and comment below with your thoughts or suggestions for our next topic.